You're listening to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, episode number 16. Today, I speak with entrepreneur, podcaster, and coach Kimberly Wiggins on the hope that comes from loss of a miscarriage. Welcome to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, where we gain inspiration and motivation from others who share their touching stories of renewing hope and discovering purpose in any circumstance. I'm your host, Christina Reisinger, and today we will be encouraged by another tremendously inspirational topic that will embolden you to release fear, begin taking small steps forward, and move into your God-given purpose to live and serve in this life. Join me for today's story. Hello, I am here on Faith Breathed Hope with Kimberly Wiggins, and I want to welcome you, Kimberly. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Christina, thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
So can you start off by just jumping in, telling the audience who you are, what you do, and what you are all about?
Sure. So I am an empowerment coach, and I'm the owner of Inspired Women Amazing Lives. That's the name of my company. I also have a production company, A Voice Worth Sharing Productions. And I work with women to help them to build their confidence and to become more visible in their business and to really just kind of get over themselves so they can build the success that they desire on their own terms. So I kind of help women to reconnect with their brilliance. You know, a lot of times we are labeled, society especially wants to label us as emotional or hurt or damaged. And I don't buy into that. You know, I just believe that we have somehow lost our brilliance. We've forgotten that we've got it deep inside of us. So I help women to get that back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are so many of the women out there who are struggling with maybe even identity, not knowing who they are or feeling like they once were someone special. And I know that for a fact, a lot of mothers that I know struggle with that, you know, after they become mom. That seems to be a label that, you know, we identify more so than with anything.
Absolutely. And I think mom is the most prestigious label that you can have, really. That's what I really think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the most important job that we ever have, and probably the most difficult one, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I myself have struggled with that. You know, I am a mom, and have my oldest is almost 9. So for a while there, I was a stay-at-home mom, and you know, I thought, well, I used to be successful. So, anyways, that's a topic for another time. I know we could go on and on about that, but today we're here to talk about how you were able to find hope from a marriage that did not go well. So, you know, we talk about grieving on the Faith Breathed Hope podcast. And, you know, originally when I sought out to start this podcast, it was about grieving the loss of a loved one. But then I realized that there's so many other ways that we grieve. We grieve the loss of relationships and marriages and the loss of jobs and different things like that. And it's very important that we, you know, in whatever stage in our life, we have people that we can connect to and relate to in those situations. So I'm really excited to have you here today to talk about the grief that goes along with the loss of a marriage. And even if you're in a marriage, the difficulties that it may have to navigate through that while you're still married. So can you just help us start and start telling your story?
Okay. Well, I come from a little small country town in South Carolina. So I'm a Southern girl, born and bred. I
Oh,
always have.
wow. I'm originally from South Carolina too. That's awesome.
Oh, wow. Small world.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's called Pineville. No one has probably ever heard of it, but it's a very small town. And um, so, I mean, there's not anything to do out there. You know, you just, as a young kid, you work, you go to school. You in the when I say work, every young kid works out there. You work in the fields because it's farm town, and so there's not a whole lot to do. So, you know, I grew up with my dad was sick. My mom um, was always like the breadwinner and the matriarch of the family. She took care of everything. There were there are 10 of us. And by the time I came along, I'm the youngest of 10. So by the time I came along, I was, there were only the 4 young girls that were in the house. So I was very impressionable, young. Um, and fast forward, you know, I'm doing really well in school. I was a book nerd, loved school, um, graduated at 16, and got married at 17 because I met this guy and never dated throughout my time in high school. A friend of mine introduced me to this guy, and I met him um, when I was in the 10th grade, and he was the only boyfriend I'd ever had. So I got married at 17. That was the only boyfriend I'd ever had. You know, I was such a book nerd and got married at 17, had my daughter at 18, my first child at 18, and um, just it was a whirlwind type of thing, but it was different for me. And so, um, you know, his family was different than mine was. His mom gravitated to me immediately. She she didn't have any daughters, so I was like her daughter, and it was just it was a different dynamic because, and this is important, I guess, in my story, is that um, my mom, I knew she loved me. She was an awesome mom. She was wise. She provided for us, even though we were poor and in a small country town. But she wasn't very emotional or expressive with her love. And so um, we never got hugs and kisses. It just wasn't like that in my house. You know, my mom was she was very strict, and she had to be, I guess. She was trying to keep her girls safe and take care of a home and take care of a sick husband. And then she worked outside of the home in order to do that. So she was just very strict. And so his family was a lot different because they were real, especially his mom. She was really loving and just so she expressed it all the time. And so, although they were different in a lot of other ways too, they fought a lot, which I didn't see back at my house because nobody fought at my house like that. And so they fought amongst each other a lot. But, you know, we were married for about 5 years. And in that 5-year span, we had 2 children, my daughter and my son. Mm-hmm. And then things began to change. I wasn't quite sure. I'm still not sure what brought on the change. And at this point, I'm not going to figure it out. But what began to really change was his attitude and the way he reacted towards me. It was like he was angry all the time. Mm. And I'll never forget the very first day that he ever hit me. I'll never forget that day. We were driving in a car. We were headed. We had carried a friend of his to Walmart, and we dropped the friend off to Walmart. And I was sitting in the back seat, and I don't even remember what he was talking about. It was something I had said to the friend that angered him and created that. And he just turned around and hit me right across the face so hard.
Oh my.
I'll never forget that day. And I couldn't understand it because it was like that came out of nowhere. I didn't
Yeah.
see it coming. And when I remember getting back to the house, and during this 5-year period, we were staying with his mom. We did not have a place of our own. And I remember getting back to the house and being just so upset, and jumped out of the car and I started walking down the road. And we lived on dirt roads actually. I started walking down the road and just talking to myself. I was really upset. I was crying, and I didn't even notice he was behind me really, because I was just so upset. And so when he caught up to me, he said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." And you know the drill on this. They always apologize. They always say they're not going to do it again. I believed him. I was young, impressionable. I didn't know what was going on. I had never seen, of course, my dad was sick. He wasn't sick to the point where he couldn't, he just had arthritis really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So he was still, he was crippled.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still in my home having conversation with us all the time, and my mom. So I've never seen him, of course, hit my mom. I'd never seen my mom hit him. So I did not understand that. And so that was something totally new to me. So he talked about how sorry he was. I believed him. And needless to say, fast forward, the abuse continued from time to time. And my kids were young. They were like 4 and 5 years old, and he didn't hide the abuse anymore. At one point he did, but then he stopped, and my kids were able to see it. It was a horrible time, mentally, physically, and emotionally for me. But the thing that I remember most about all of that is wanting to be able to get my kids out of that environment. And so during this time, I had a really good friend of mine. She knew what was happening. 2 friends actually, and they knew what were happening. And so my friend moved me out of that environment a couple times. And his mom knew what was happening. But of course, it's his mom. And although she loved me, and I really believe she did, but she didn't love me more than her son. So she was talking to her son about not doing this, but she was also talking to me about staying. And so, I had a girlfriend who kept talking me out of staying. And she actually, a couple times after he had hit me, she packed me up. She came over while he was at work, packed me up and took me to her house. And I would stay there a couple weeks and then I'd go back. And so it was just this weird syndrome for me, this weird time where I hadn't found out my identity. I hadn't found out who I was. I hadn't really found my voice. So it was this really weird time of me not knowing whether I should stay in this relationship for my kids or being in this really close-knit family where, and I was working. I had a job. I always had a job. I gave up the opportunity to go on a full scholarship to college just to do all of this. But I always had a job. So I needed someone to care for the kids when I was not there. And so his family did that for me. And so I was always in this place of, should I leave? Should I stay? I'm going to be all alone. And the reason I felt like I was going to be all alone, because yes, I had tons of brothers and sisters. I had my mom, My father had passed away when I was 14. So um, I felt alone. The reason why I felt so alone is because my family never knew. They never knew any of this was going on. Um, as a matter of fact, it was just about probably about 5 or 6 months ago that I sat down with the two sisters that are closest to me and my nephew, and I was telling this story to them. I felt compelled to tell it to be able to bridge a gap between my sister and her son because they were having a difficult time. So, I'm an empowerment coach. I felt sharing my story would be able to bridge that, and it did. It really did. But they were so shocked to hear this story because they had never heard it.
Can I stop you right there before we go on? I want to ask, do you have any idea? A lot of times we do things and we don't know why. Do you have any idea why you didn't want to talk to your family about it? Was there, because
Yes.
before you had said you were afraid to be alone, but I figured there were some fears coming up for you. Can you share about that?
I was embarrassed. I was
Embarrassed. Okay.
so embarrassed. I did not know how my mom would react. I did not know how my sisters would react. I
Mm.
mean, and a part of that embarrassment was so I was always considered, like, although I was the youngest, I was always considered the smartest of the family. And so I had to live up to these big goals
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't live up to because I didn't go to college, because I put all of that off for marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and fought about that with my mom, and fought about this guy with my mom. So I wasn't going to by any means let my mom
Mm-hmm.
know you were right. And
Oh,
I was just so embarrassed. And
yeah.
and so I never seek the help of my family during that time.
Yeah, can I also say, were you feeling like maybe we could insert failure there? Maybe worried that people
Oh
would,
yeah.
since you had such great expectations for yourself and they did as well, you didn't want to
Yes.
present yourself to them as possible failure in this area. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
I
probably
felt
pretty
like I had
common,
failed.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was a great question. I did feel as though I had failed miserably, and I didn't know how to get myself out of this loop that I was in with this person that I couldn't let go of, but I couldn't keep in my life because it was so detrimental. And so, um, just to fast forward through some of that, that went on. We were married for about 16 years.
Oh,
That
wow.
Yeah. So that um go well, let me it, but we weren't together all of that time
Okay.
because the back and forth of leaving and coming back, all of that, and so eventually I did leave. I did a lot of things while I was still in that position. um I went to school. I got my degree. I went to school part-time. I worked my way up into a corporate job. There's a lot of things I did do, but in a lot of ways I was still suffering emotionally and mentally inside because I was still connected to this person that was very abusive physically and mentally and
Mm-hmm.
verbally. And I was just not in a very good space for
Mm-hmm.
myself. Still had not found my identity, my voice. Um, and the culmination of it all was actually um, him actually trying to hurt me in a very public place, at a mall one day. I was there with some friends. It was his weekend to keep the kids because we weren't together at this point in time. And it was like a little strip mall. And he pulled up to the curb while I was walking on this strip mall. And I was there, and he um, tried to attack me there at the strip mall. The kids were in the car. Um, And that was the one thing. It was almost like, and when you grow up in the South, in a small country town, you have this concept of God in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of God is not fully explained because of the simple fact, and my mom would tell us to pray. My mom would pray with us. So we had the concept, but not the not the concept well enough for me to understand that God had a real part in my life, that
Mm-hmm.
God was actually the creator and the guider of my life. I never fully got that
Mm-hmm.
until I started going through all of these different things. And I never, some people would say, I hear from God. I never heard from God, but I just knew he was there. It's almost like I could feel this weird presence with me,
Yeah.
while I was going through these different things. And I'll never forget the day that this all came to a head at the mall. I remember him pulling up on the curb. I remember him trying to get in his glove compartment, which I knew what was in the glove compartment. I knew
Mm-hmm.
that he had a weapon in the glove compartment. And I remember that glove compartment not coming open. I just remember me running away. Um, and I remember my friends coming out of the stores, um, running towards me. I remember him jumping out of the car while the car was moving and the kids were in the car. And my daughter was old enough to jump in the front seat and hit the brakes, not knowing how to drive. I felt God's presence in just
Mm-hmm.
all of that,
Right.
not knowing what was going to happen that day.
Right.
Um, and and that wasn't, I mean, that was the breaking point for me where I knew it just had to be over. I just could not, there was no way that I could ever recover from that. And so um the police came out, they arrested him, um and there started the 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 divorce, really. um he didn't want a divorce. I wanted a divorce, which was problematic, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And um, based on everything that had happened, though, the judge granted me the divorce. We didn't have to wait the customary year for that to happen. And but what was even more shocking for me, and I just wanted to give some backdrop to that, was all of the grief that I felt after that divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Even though all of the things that he had put me through, it was not a happy marriage by any means.
Mm-hmm.
um I can't say that it was, but I can say there were moments, sporadic moments of happiness, more so with his family than with him. um there was a lot of infidelity. He cheated a lot. He had children while we were married, outside the home. It was not by any means a happy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not prepared for the grief that I would feel once the marriage was over. I was
Yeah.
definitely not prepared for that. And I couldn't figure out why I was feeling so worthless, and raising questions in my mind about going back, raising questions in my mind about if I had stayed. I just, it was, I couldn't understand it.
I have this saying that I tell people, and this is mostly, I started this when I talk about losing a loved one, but I think it probably can go across the board. But grief is awkward and it defies logic, and I have had people kind of try to come back at me on that. But most people that I run into and speak with would agree that it does defy logic. You know, you start having these thoughts that in your mind you can't possibly understand. Like you said, you should have been happy, you should have felt some relief, but instead you were in this grief that you didn't understand. And I find with many people that I talk to that that is really the case, and that may have something to do with, you know, your fears and um, your ideal, your expectations of the way that life should be. You know, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about what you think, um, as a Christian woman, how you felt as far as a divorce, because I know that there is a lot of differing of opinion out there. You know, as a Christian, we are supposed to stay in a marriage. We're supposed to say until death do us part. But then you come across these situations like you went through, and you tried as much as you could, and then there was that breaking point.
Yeah, I will tell you, as far as the grief is concerned, it just comes from all kind of different angles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I look back at it, what surprised me the most was how I felt as though I were dying. It wasn't like the marriage had died. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like something inside of me had died.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like once again I had failed at
Mm-hmm.
at this thing, and um it didn't matter. I could look at all the accomplishments that I'd made while I was there. You know, I got my degree while I was there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had a really good job. It wasn't like things were just really, for me, I had a lot of accomplishments personally, but I just really feel like at that time, I still felt like I had died, like I had failed overall. I was defined by this whole marriage thing. And not only that, you know, in where I grew up, in my environment, it was just not, it was I wouldn't say it was unheard of, but it was just not cool
Mm-hmm.
to to be married and go through all of this and leave, and you know, you were supposed to stay together no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so um you know, I feel like during that time, I was at my lowest point of self-worth. I had no clue of my value at that point. I thought no one would ever, I thought I would never remarry. I thought another man would never want me. I
Mm-hmm.
felt as though, um, you know, I was just not worthy of anything good in my life. I was at my lowest point ever in life when that happened. Um, and just from the, you know, just from the Christian perspective, you know, um, I thought that God just wouldn't love me at that point.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. A lot of people think that if they get a divorce, then maybe, you know, God, you know, is punishing them, or will punish them for not obeying or trying to stick it out. And yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I really, I really thought that God would not love me anymore at that point. And um, I'll never forget, um, eventually I moved away because I just, there was just so much memories there and just so many things there. I had to move away. And so I kept moving from one small town to a next, and I would move a little further out, and I would move a little further out because I was trying to just get away from it all. And then
Mm-hmm.
finally I said, I need to start fresh. And so I moved to Atlanta. I took my kids, uprooted them, moved them to Atlanta. My kids were mad at me. Um, but eventually they loved it. Um, so, but I still, even through all of that, I could not shake that feeling of not, um, of a failing, of not
Mhm.
being worthy of anything good. That feeling, that feeling of that, even the thought of being in another marriage was taboo.
Mhm.
Um, because of that, because I just felt that, you know, God would not approve of any of that. That I just needed to. I'll tell you what I thought, um, that I was going to do to atone for my sins, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, I was just going to remain a single mom with my kids, not date, take care of my kids, and just sacrifice my life for my kids. And I felt that God would think that I was worthy enough
Mhm.
to be able to be forgiven. So I wasn't forgiving myself. I had such a wrong misconception, of who God was, and and how he was showing up for me in my life. I had such, and all of this stemmed from how I saw myself, really.
Mhm.
All of it
Mhm.
stemmed from that. And um it wasn't until when I moved to Atlanta, I was working, for a very large company, as assistant controller, and I met a guy there. And the guy, um, he said, "I'd love to introduce you to my wife." And because, you know, I didn't have any friends, I didn't know very many people. And because, you know, I was staying home just trying to take care of my kids, trying
Mhm.
to get God to forgive me. And um he said, "I'd love for you to meet my wife. I'll tell you what, you can meet her at church. Do you have a church?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Well, why don't you come and go with us to church,
Mhm.
and you can meet her at church, and we'll go from there." And um, he gave me the address. I met them at church. I immediately fell in love with the church.
Awesome.
And I'm still a member of that church today, but that is where I became educated. I built a relationship with God, a personal relationship. I was able to forgive me. I was
Mhm.
able to find my voice. I was able to move forward in life and not let that weight of guilt,
Mhm.
um, just really weigh on me. And I feel like, um, I was able to get over the grief of that marriage while I was there. You know, I
Mhm.
had taken some counseling sessions there, and talked to, um, just talked in a group counseling session about a lot of this, and I was able to finally release a lot
Mhm.
of that guilt and a lot of the grief that I felt.
Right.
Um,
I want to address something. You said that you kept trying to move, and it reminds me of this quote, and I don't have it verbatim, but it's basically like, "Wherever I go, there I will be." So when you're trying to run away from the things that you really need to deal with, you know, your mindset, your beliefs, it doesn't matter how many times you start over. You know, there is something to be said for a fresh start, but if your belief system is a certain way, and you need to deal with emotions, and you need to find forgiveness, and seek a relationship with the Lord and find his grace, then it doesn't matter how many times that you move. And I think you noticed that. Was there any one certain point you said at the church, you know, during your time in Atlanta, the membership, the counseling that you received? do you remember any one defining moment that you could say, hey, I had an aha moment and things just really clicked? And I'll give you an example. For me, it came, I think, in the second year after my daughter had passed away, and I'm having a conversation with my husband, who I at that time resented because I felt like he did not grieve properly. And we were discussing the stuff that went on at the hospital and how I had all the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and maybe this happened or that happened. And he really looked at me and he said, "Are you going to sue them?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, why do you keep trying to control things? Because she's not going to come back," basically. I mean, those weren't his exact words, but it was an extremely defining moment in my mind, which is very simplistic. And most of the things that I think that we go through are very simple, but we just cannot wrap our heads around them. And, I started to think I am torturing myself, for something that is beyond my control. And he said to me, he said, "You're never going to understand why. Maybe when you get to heaven, the Lord will tell you, but maybe he won't. Maybe he will keep that for himself." And I started to really think about the fact that, you know what, when I get to heaven, it's not going to matter anyways.
Yeah.
I get to see her and I get to be with the Lord. And so that to me, it did not dissolve it in its entirety, but it really helped me start taking that turn towards a life of hope and living beyond my loss, and to be able to bring joy back into my life as well. So do you have anything that really kind of a defining moment, or is it just kind of a conglomeration of everything that you are walking through?
Yeah, I had a one-on-one session with the counselor, and one of the things, and it was a male counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why, but coming from him, it just made all the difference in the world. We had a one-on-one session, and he said this to me. He said, "I notice that every time we talk about your marriage and we talk about all the things that you've been through, and we talk about your ex-husband and his family and all these things, you put yourself in the driver's seat. Like you are just everything that happened, that you created all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were just by yourself in all of this and you created all of this."
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, "I want you to hear me today. I don't want you to think. I don't want you to start forming a response. I want you to look into my eyes and I want you to hear me today." He said to me, and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "All of the players in your life, every last one of them had a responsibility and
Mm-hmm.
they had a choice. And you can't take on the responsibility and the choices for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You were only responsible for your own choices." And he said, "I want you to recognize that. I want you to hear me. You could have done 100 things differently, but you would have never stopped your ex-husband from being the person that
Mm-hmm.
he decided to be. It wasn't the person that God made him to be. It was the person that he decided to be."
Mm-hmm.
And that, when he said that to me, and in addition, he said, "And all of those things, I want you to embrace the fact that you went through all of those things to be right here, right now, at this moment."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "It's not by happenstance. You were meant to be right here, right now, at this moment." And when he said that to me, a little light bulb went off in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And something inside of me said, "God, you were there all along. Just
Mm-hmm.
walking me through this, just being present, just walking me through this. Like, because there were times when I felt that like God had left me. I felt like it was like, what, where are you? Why, you know? Um, and so there were times when when I say I felt all alone, I felt all alone. And so at that moment when he told me that, it was like a light bulb went on, and I just felt, I knew that God had just been there right along with me every step of the way. I could go back and think about different instances and just different circumstances throughout, and I could see the breadcrumbs of God. I could see his footprint in everything. It's like, it was just amazing. And so that for me was like a really big turning point.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I believe when we go through hard times, difficult times, very much we do have a choice in what we do with those times and how we emerge from that and how we grow from that. But when we are in the middle of those times, our focus changes, and so our focus is on the problem at hand, where God is still there, but it's very easy, even as a Christian, I believe, to get in a spot where we're beginning to doubt and be frustrated and not really hear God or know where he is at that time. And out of desperation, you may say, God, where are you? Because I need you the most. And it makes me think of a couple of things. The first thing is that the Footprints poem. Are you familiar with that? He says
Right.
that, when you thought I wasn't there, it was then I was carrying you. And I learned that as a little girl. And I love that one. And then the other thing is, a lot of times when I talk to people who have lost loved ones, they immediately decide that God is not there. And so even if they were Christians or are Christians at the time, they can get very angry and really say, okay, God, why did you do this to me? Why did you allow this to happen? There's so much pain. And it's because they allow themselves to be focused on the pain. And I'm not invalidating that pain by any means, but
Right.
I do believe that um, a choice in how we emerge from that pain, and it's not going to happen right away. I'm not talking about right when you're in the middle of something or you're going through something, but it certainly does help to try to be in constant prayer, even through those valleys, if you can be, as much as you can. And then there are times where you're in so much of a valley that all you can say is, God, I need you. Or for me, like I will say, God, I just miss her. I talk about my daughter. I just miss her. I can't pray. I absolutely cannot say anything. I have no words, but I can say I just miss her or something like that. And so I think as a Christian, it's very important to just know that he is with you. And even as a non-Christian, if you are wondering, if you are doubting, if you are angry or anything, if you're able to turn your focus off of the problem, which is a huge feat in of itself, right?
Yes.
Then you can start seeing the Lord in your situation. So how do you, you have emerged from this, you have had this moment where you have realized that you can emerge from this and begin to find hope. What does that look like going forward? And do you have any encouragement for someone who may be going through a similar situation?
Yes, definitely. I mean, moving forward, um, I wanted the hope for moving forward is definitely me being able to share this story. I think that um, I hid this story for a long time because I was so ashamed of this story. Sometimes we step out and we have this perfect persona where we are like we've never had any struggles in our lives, but the struggles are there, so you can share the story so someone else can get over their struggles.
Most definitely.
So Yeah. So um, being able to do that for me has been just amazing in itself. And being able to have the courage and to just be brave and bold enough to be able to
Mhm.
share my story. Um, and so for the future moving forward, I will continue to do that. I will continue to make my story, to be transparent and authentic about my story and make it a part of my life and my business. So I'm very hopeful for the future. And there are parts of me, I'll tell you, um, just being transparent, there are parts of me that still find it difficult to be able to date properly
Mhm.
and trust people properly. And and I know those things about myself.
Mhm.
And as an empowerment coach, I have to talk myself off the ledge in some of those areas as well. And I
Mhm.
continue to receive coaching from someone else in that area. Just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I don't have coaching.
Right.
Um,
I think
and
that's
so,
super. I'm sorry, I just jumped in.
yeah,
I think that that's super important for people to understand that when you are in a place of authority or you're trying to be the one who encourages people, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. And I have struggled with that myself and find out that I realized that in being able to be transparent, like you are saying, that it helps people understand that you're real,
yeah,
that things are not just rosy. And it is different than kind of airing your dirty laundry. You're saying, hey, you know what, things happen, and you can be in a place that is better. But knowing and acknowledging that you still need help and reaching out for your support on a continuous basis is very important. So
absolutely.
yeah.
So that is how I am working through all of this in the future. I will always have a um a mindset coach per se to be able to help me work through this. Um, you can't see about yourself sometimes the things that you really need to see. Sometimes it takes an outside force to
Mhm.
be able to see that. And so I know there are blind spots that I can't see. And I want to be the best me that I can become. And it's a continual improving process. And to be able to do that, I know that having a coach in my corner will help with that. And so one of the things that I want to leave with other women who may have gone through an abusive situation and had to get out of this situation and divorce is that you are stronger than you know, you
Mhm.
are braver than you know, and you're bolder than you can ever imagine, because there are amazing things that you can do with your life after that. you
Mhm.
know that is one of the reasons that I kind of help women pull that pull all of that back up, because we'll bury it. It's real easy for us to bury it. We want to bury it. We don't want to think about it. I buried it for years.
Mhm.
And so being able to regurgitate a lot of that and put it front and center and look at it and understand it and heal from it and grow from it is super important.
Mhm.
And so once you have gotten all of that out of the way, then, only then, are you able to reach back down inside and say, oh, there's that brilliance I had. I couldn't find it because it was gone. Because um, that's how I felt. I felt that my brilliance was completely gone.
Mhm.
So for women that are listening, I want you to know that there is a lot of hope
Mhm.
after a marriage is over.
Right.
Um, and you should, there's a process for the grieving, and I won't belittle that process ever in my life, because I know I've been through it. Um, I know what it feels like, but you can't stay there. That is
Mhm.
the only thing. If I had not found the help that I did, I possibly would have stayed there, and
Right.
I would not have made the moves in my business and in my life that I've made today. So I think it's important to recognize when you're in a space that you need to come out of. And for me, that was a space of grieving a marriage that didn't serve me well, and it didn't. Just grieving that marriage for too long. And so to be able to know when to come out of that and to move on with your life.
Right. And my coach, when I was certified to become a grief coach, she said that you have to have an obligation to live your life. You are still here. You have still been given this place on earth. And so what you do with that time that you're still here, is up to you. And I think that it is so beautiful that you are saying that, when I share my story, I'm being bold and I'm being courageous, but I'm also making myself in a place that may be a little uncomfortable, but I'm here to help other women. And, as women, we can get caught up in that whole taking care of everybody else kind of thing, as we're natural nurturers. And so, but that can also be a mask, where we're stuffing everything and we're not paying attention to ourselves. And that's one thing I'm hearing a lot lately, is that people are talking about self-care, and kind of goes along with that, put your mask on before you can help anybody else kind of thing. So I am so excited that you are here and that you're sharing your story with other people. I think it's so super important, because I think that relationship struggles are something that are probably very shaming, and they are very difficult to admit to, because you don't want other people to know that there is a struggle. And so I really, really, commend you for being able to have that courage to share your story and to help these other women. Where can people find you? Your podcast, and where else can they find you?
My business and my podcast, same name, Inspired Women, Amazing Lives. And you can find it all at inspiredwomenamazinglives.com.
Okay. Are you on Facebook, Instagram, anything else?
Yes, I am on Facebook at Kim Wiggins Coaching, and I am on Instagram at the Kim Wiggins.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. It was so wonderful speaking with you today. And I would encourage any of you who are out there listening to this, and maybe Kimberly is speaking to you. Maybe you're in a relationship and you're having a difficult time, and you're feeling all the feelings, the guilt, the fear, and you're trying to make a decision to move on, or maybe you have moved on, and you're feeling that grief. That grief can come from many different angles. There are many different facets of grief. I would encourage you to reach out to Kimberly, and also just, if find some help somewhere. But we thank you so much for being on the Faith Breathes Hope podcast, Kimberly. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you all continue to be blessed and bless others.
All right. Thank you so much. Great.
And I want to thank you for joining us on Faith Breathed Hope, where you gain inspiration and motivation to renew hope and discover purpose in any circumstance. Please like and share this podcast and give us a review on iTunes. Be blessed.